Hello there. Well, I'm joined by my friend Srujan Akula. How are you, Srujan?
And nice to meet you
Very
again.
good. Well, you have a very interesting company. I love your space, the data enablement space. I've played in it going back into even the 90s. But before we get to that and what's going on in your space and your company, I want to hear a little bit about you. We met through a very, in my mind, a legendary angel investor and entrepreneur himself, Nitin Mehta. I'm glad he introduced us. So, Srujan, tell us a little about your background and what the insight was to start the modern data company.
Great. Thanks for inviting me here, Kanan, and hello to all of your listeners. Just by introduction, I'm Sujan Akula. I'm the co-founder and CEO of the Modern Data Company. We are a Palo Alto-based data infrastructure startup. I started this company about 5 years ago, and the genesis for the company was, as I was building data platforms, large scale data platforms for the ad tech and the martech verticals, along with my co-founder, who was the head of engineering in these prior three companies where I worked. What we realized is how complicated every enterprise is making their data management, over tooling themselves, over resourcing. And I feel some of the inefficiencies are a result of, overspending and over complicating your existing data management stack.
Yeah,
And what we saw through that process is the same approaches that every company is taking, leading to the same kind of problems that they have faced in terms of being able to truly make data work for your business, which is the end goal.
yeah,
That wasn't happening. Being product people, we realize, when there is such a consistent set of inputs and a consistent set of outputs in terms of failures, there is a better way to think about solving this problem. And two things we wanted to do. One is we need to simplify data management. How do we kind of move away from 15, 20 tools that bespoke, custom build with constant maintenance towards a more simplified approach, which is where we can came up with this concept of an operating system for data that simplifies to a significant extent your data management.
yeah.
Second thing I realized is this constant thing about let's buy a data lake license, just dump all our data into a lake and magically, that is going to make my enterprise data ready. It never really happens.
Yeah.
Second thing we did is how do we make sure that customers just don't overspend on processing all kinds of data that really, is unnecessary. In this process, customers kind of look at every data to be of equal priority, and that is a lot of money that you're wasting as a company, in terms of getting to the end state.
That's a really good point. A couple of things that jump out at me there. First, the fact that you and your co-founder have been through the wars together multiple times, that's a good symbol that the team is going to withstand all the ups and downs we face as entrepreneurs. Having a co-founder that you've kind of been through joy and victory and defeat with is very important because it kind of
Absolutely.
makes the struggle work. So that's a great lesson if you can do it, repeat the strategy with the same team. The second thing is it sounds like you had an aha moment.
Yes.
And I love that with data because you're right. Not all data is created equal, and you kind of start to think of data as a product instead of just kind of the raw fuel to drive these models.
Yeah.
So we'll get into that. One of the theses that we've had for some time is that going back in the 90s, I helped build an OLAP company that eventually sold to Cognos. And so I've been around this idea of data visualization, real-time data analytics. And, we've always thought of it as a very fragmented market. You have your data pipelines, you have your data analysts. Yeah. And I wrote a blog post a while ago about the many different types of data roles there are in organizations. But then in 2023, when the LLM phrase took off, and my thesis is that um, since then, that whole fragmented world has changed, and now it's basically built around a platform, that you can drive everything through. So let's pay a little homage to because there was 100+ data tool and data enablement companies, all venture funded around, and kind of what's the significant shift that you've seen in the
Yeah.
last couple years in the approach from the customers, but also in terms of how the vendors have to adopt.
No, no, great question, Kanan. And to kind of what you said, right? Let's take a little step back. During the big data era or even relational databases,
Yeah.
the construct there was how do I create these dashboards and reports and insights, so that my execs can make data-driven decisions. led us to, these third normal form, the relational databases. But once different types of data started getting produced, the volumes of data increase, that could not scale. So there was a need for a paradigm shift to be more NoSQL, bring cloud scale to data, make large volumes of data processing a lot more efficient.
Yeah,
That really helped us with, the where we are, until the advent of LLMs, where,
yeah,
we could process massive amounts of data, fuse heterogeneous data together and make it work, with quality governance sort of applied at the edge.
yeah.
And that worked to an extent. Especially generative AI is a very different paradigm. It doesn't build itself off of structured facts or structured data. It needs the knowledge around the data. It needs to understand the relationships of your data as it actually went from being generated to where it is. It needs
Right.
to understand the semantics of your data.
Yeah,
So it's more essential to treat data as a knowledge-based artifact rather than just a structured collection of facts. I think
yeah,
this is the big difference in how the LLM capabilities want to, access your data. Broadly, I think we broad brush everything as data, but the LLM world, the future in Gen AI and AI requires us to truly treat data as more knowledge based, and the knowledge and the context around the data, almost like a neural network of your data, right? So
right,
that these
right.
models can learn and be as effective. That's sort of the shift I'm seeing, Kanan. Yeah.
No, you're bringing up a really good point, Srujan, which is that the notion of data, we've always had metadata, which is data about data, and that was kind of the secret to the old systems. But now with the advent of these systems and these basically unlimited context windows, what becomes very important is the governance of the data, the provenance of the data, and how can you relatively weight. If I get this data from, the Wall Street Journal, I get this data from some unknown tweeter in Seattle, those the two datas are not created equal.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And that's sort of where, this whole knowledge, when I say knowledge, is a more broad brush term to say it needs to understand if Kanan is asking a question, what am I supposed to show? What am I supposed to hide? What I need to filter? That also is part of the knowledge of the data in a way, from a compliance perspective, how do I make this data available for an internal user versus a third party user? So all of this is essential. And to your point, I think governance is one of the big reasons when I speak with customers, everybody has gotten excited, started experimenting with some of these, Gen AI models within their enterprise context.
yeah,
But a big majority of them aren't able to push these to production, mainly because of the governance. And that,
100%. Yeah,
again, with this new generation of data infrastructure built for the AI era, I think governance is going to be natively built in. It's not like I'm buying a governance tool to, protect my silos of data copies, but something that is natively built into your infrastructure and carries through the entire data lifecycle. I think that will become essential for us as we scale Gen AI.
I love it. So when you approached building out the data OS that you have, were you going after kind of the data store, data warehouses, Snowflake, Databricks kind of market, or did you always want to have kind of a holistic solution all the way from data pipelines through to kind of the analytics and the storage?
I mean, the real reason why we started this is we identified there is a big last mile gap in data. The Snowflakes, Databricks, other lake houses or cloud warehouses, they do a great job in bringing all this data together. But from that point onwards, how am I, scaling my advanced analytics? Am I able to build apps on top of this? Am I able to share this data? Am I able to provide an API layer? That is where I've seen a big challenge with a lot of customers faced is that last mile. And Data OS was built to bridge that last mile gap where customers don't need to spend so much of extra tooling and not worrying about data formats, not worrying about how do I prepare data differently
Right.
for analytics, machine learning.
100%. That's been kind of not just in the data enabled phase, in software, that's been the holy grail, which is you get the non-technical kind of business exec or analyst, and they can actually, without the help of IT, without the help of someone in the back end, do their own kind of queries. Is that kind of the idea? We call it the data shift right
Yeah.
kind of
So,
movement. Yeah.
yeah, we fully embrace this outcome first approach to data. What I mean by that is you start with what is the intent, business intent that you're trying to, solve for.
Yeah.
Am I preparing my customer file to be shared with a third party, or am I building my customer data to be able to run a churn model? These two require very different ways that you would prepare, govern, the data, for example. So
Interesting.
understanding that business intent, I think, is crucial. If you start that way, where I know exactly what is this data going to do, is what sort of compliance is necessary, how fresh and quality the data needs to be at what quality, then you can be smart about what data needs to be processed and how that data needs to be delivered for that specific outcome. So that's number one, in how we think, is that outcome first nature.
I got you.
Second thing is to be able to deliver on such a promise where, I understand your outcome and now let me go back and look at what data do you have and make it available to you, requires you to have an understanding of your existing infrastructure, which
Yeah.
is where a unified approach makes more sense than fragmented approaches. And that's what we've done with the data oasis. On one side, start with outcome first, capture that business intent using data products, and then learn everything we need to learn about your existing data infra at the metadata level. And to what I was saying earlier, convert that into a knowledge, provide knowledge graphs, provide the right tooling so you can always have the context of the data. When you have that kind of understanding, then you can be very smart about what needs to be picked up, what needs to be processed, how build on-demand pipelines in an automated manner. And that's the approach we are taking, Kanan.
Very
I
interesting.
hope that clarifies, yeah.
Right, right. You're building so much more of a knowledge graph into the data, understanding kind of its temporal nature and kind of what's the use of it. Well, tell me a little bit more about that. When you because you said something interesting. You said not all data is created equal. Is it use case specific? Like, healthcare, we all know that there's tremendous sensitivity to the information.
Mhm.
Financial applications, it's all kind of time based and kind of the value of the data goes away very quickly when you're doing some of these high-paced models. Is that what you mean? You're associating these kind of attributes to the data?
Absolutely. Like for example, we take web click stream data and we work with a lot of retail companies. That's generally a very
E-commerce, sure.
high volume data, which is streamed in constantly from all of your digital properties.
Yeah,
Again, that has a temporal nature to this. It's only as valuable as the recency of the data,
that's right.
in a lot of sense. So how do we treat data like that versus data that is coming, from financial systems or CRMs or my ERPs, which is a very different kind of data, right?
Yeah,
So we need to be able to differentiate that, understand everything about the data mostly in place, and then use this understanding to be more smart about what needs to be processed when and how much money am I spending on these things.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We've got all kinds of nightmare stories about people that had a budget for a whole $5 million for a year for Snowflake, and they ran through the budget in the first quarter. This was a large bank, but basically, the way they kind of charge you for how you move data around, it can be amazingly eye-opening experience.
Yeah.
Um,
Like,
you
I
mentioned, yeah, go ahead.
see just a point to make there. That pricing, this, I mean, what you said, I've heard from I don't know how many customers, pretty much every other customer I speak with is like, I can't predict my costs. I thought it'll be this, but now suddenly I'm faced with these kind of, increased costs, right? Part of it is also sort of how the data industry today is. Every product essentially is making money based on the compute cycles that they're able to drive. So there is an instant, the pricing model that prevails in the data industry today, I don't think is as customer centric as it could be. I would love to see a more value based pricing here where you don't disincent customers in processing this data.
Yeah,
I need to make a choice. Do I process the data? Do I not because of cost? But if there is a pricing model which is more value driven, where I'm paying for what I'm using and I have an ROI attribution I can make,
yeah.
that is, I think, a much better way to think about this. And
Yeah, I agree with you, Srujan, and that's kind of when you think about where AI is taking us. That's where we're all going. Where it's going to be, what have you done for me? Not how much data have you moved. That's really good. I think you should keep pushing that envelope. That's what I think. Customer, it's tricky because there's a lot of things that go into that, and some things are subjective. But that's definitely the way I think that the market and our industry should go. Um, you mentioned something else that's very interesting. You call, I think you said, the single source of truth. Uh, that's a really good concept because that's kind of the holy grail too. Like Salesforce is trying to cement their place into to a lot, and they really have because they claim they're the single source of truth for all this kind of data. Is that kind of the idea, and is that good for the vendor or is that good for the customer? Tell me about the single source of truth and what your customers are saying about that.
I think I think there's a nuance to the single source of truth, right? I There is a physical single source of truth or a logical single source of truth in a way. If you prepare all your data into this golden data set and say that is my single source of truth, it truly isn't in a way, isn't it? Because you need to do extra to prepare it for a machine learning use case, or if you're building an API layer on top of it, you have to do more,
Yeah,
on top of it. The way we think about it is the single source of truth is more of a logical construct where and for us it's a data product which essentially maps all of the underlying relationships of multiple data sets, the semantic models, etc., to create that logical construct.
yeah,
Then based on the use case that needs to be delivered, we'll prepare the data and deliver it in those ways while keeping the lineage intact.
yeah.
So that's sort of how I look at the single source of truth. Oftentimes, when I talk to customers, they look at this as more of the physical isolation, and this is my golden copy, and everything will be driven through that, which really doesn't really happen,
Yeah.
given the nature of,
It's a theoretical concept. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, a logical source of truth totally makes sense, and I think it's a huge benefit for customers.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't tell you how many times I've heard large enterprise customers, who are like 20, $30 billion in revenue say, I can't get one answer for how many customers do I have today.
Right.
That's because
Yeah.
of, not having a single place to go.
No. You're right. I remember Larry Ellison famously said a while ago, you have all these systems here, but let me give you some tricky questions that you might not be able to answer with this huge multi-million-dollar implementation. How many
Yep.
employees do you have? And because there's so much data in so many different places that it's actually not a trivial question to answer. Um,
Absolutely.
so the other thing and we're kind of hitting on this, and this also plays into the thesis of how LLMs have changed everything. We both know that 80%, give or take, a percent of the data that enterprises are dealing with is unstructured.
Mhm.
It's now becoming video and emails and all this stuff. The stuff in the SAP database is great, but what we do with the unstructured data. Talk to me about structured versus unstructured, your approach to it, and how that LLMs obviously have helped that in a huge way because they love unstructured data.
I mean, we do work with a lot of clients. One of our customers is one of the largest or the largest architecture firm in the world with what 80 years worth of survey data, which is all unstructured.
Yeah,
Right? And how do I now, what we do is kind of structure it in a way that these complex web of unstructured data, especially if you can imagine multiple levels of nesting in a survey data, how do I kind of
yeah,
make it into a structured format so that I can actually start learning off of it, right? So we we do work with a lot of clients, and to your point, unstructured data is the majority of enterprise data. And the LLMs, the fundamental construct in how the LLMs are built and work, they actually work a lot better on unstructured data than they do on structured data, to be
yeah,
honest. I think the blind spot for a lot of enterprises is how do I get like a OpenAI model or a Mistral to understand my structured data,
yeah,
understand my schemas, my column names, my relationships, my governance as an enterprise, which is, I think, where the bigger challenge lies, in my opinion.
yeah,
Unstructured data is more on the cost side. How do I rationalize processing that volumes of data? But for the core business, the decisions are being made oftentimes on a lot of structured data.
yeah.
And yeah, that requires a different way of thinking, which is where I started off with. That structured data delivered in structured formats is not enough for Gen AI.
Yeah.
It needs to be, more knowledge based.
Yeah. Is there a particular vertical that is so I kind of we kind of you kind of explained kind of the notion of the data OS and how it provides this kind of semantic layer with a lot of intelligence that obviously has tremendous benefits in terms of building applications and features and functions that business executives need much quicker. What
Mhm.
is there a particular vertical that you've gone after that you find is a little more obviously we all like the verticals. I personally, as an entrepreneur, like the verticals where people understand technology as a weapon.
Okay.
Finance is the obvious one there. They get that if they have, you know, 5 millisecond advantage of you on getting the data that could equate to millions of dollars. And so, is there a vertical in particular that you are leaning to that with the solution that you've built, or is it really as horizontal as it sounds?
So it is a true horizontal solution at the layer we play and how we deliver value, but our go-to market is obviously very verticalized. So where we are seeing a lot of inbound interest from is to what you said, the financial services, vertical broadly.
Yeah,
Given how tech savvy they are so far in how they use the data and the variance of data, the amount of data, the regulatory and compliance needs that they have,
yeah,
they see a lot of value in a solution like what we deliver. Retail CPG has been another vertical that has been pretty good for us.
yeah,
Uh, and we are starting to see a lot of very interesting opportunities in the broader manufacturing industrial vertical,
yeah,
especially predictive maintenance and things like that. How do you do that more efficiently?
yeah.
It's another vertical where we are seeing a lot of attraction.
I love it. Is there any case study, or you don't have to use customer names if you don't want to, that you want to highlight that kind of shows the ROI of building in a layer like this? And I would call it a data layer that you're being. I assume there's some kind of upfront work we have to do to kind of create the layer, and then once you get that layer, you get these untold benefits from doing it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. This layer is going to be, think of it as the entire data gravity for your business teams and your domains. To come to this layer, not going to your current databases, lakehouses, warehouses, for all of your use cases. So you're right in kind of calling it a layer in that sense.
Yeah,
Uh, we just started working with one of the largest device manufacturers, in the world today, right? And what this customer was struggling with is how do I bring all of this device telemetry data that comes from millions, hundreds of millions of devices?
yeah,
How do I rationalize all that towards better warranty management, better customer support, better predictive maintenance? Right? And they believe, especially on the customer support side, conversational interfaces on top of this kind of a data could be very useful for their customer support teams to serve the end customer,
yeah,
as well as the customers themselves to manage the fleet of these devices more efficiently. And that's sort of what they were trying to do. And the choice they had is, either I start experimenting with bad data, knowing the results might be poor, or I fix my data first to prepare my infrastructure to be AI ready, and then experiment with this.
right.
That was a 12 quarter, quote unquote, journey for them.
Yeah,
And this is something that I see with a lot of customers we are speaking with today. I feel like they're in this no-win situation where, do I start experimenting with Gen AI or lose a competitive advantage, knowing that my data is not prepared well or it could be bad,
yeah,
or fix my data infra and the data management and then experiment.
yeah,
Our approach of being able to sit on top of their current data maturity and create this layer, this last mile layer that we spoke about within 5 weeks to enable experimentation is, what really was a aha for this customer. And
absolutely. Yeah,
that is, I think, where I feel very, good about, what we are doing at Modern and the traction that we have seen is we are able to get customers to be AI ready, no matter what is their current data maturity in a matter of weeks.
yeah.
So
Well,
that's
I love it, Srujan. That's a great example. What I see is that, yeah, you're right. It's very clear to me, the old data enablement framework, fragmented, best of breed solutions, brittle pipelines, wrangling, it's been completely obliterated by LLMs. But you have to make sure that the data that you're feeding those LLMs is kind of, differentiated, crystal clear, and has that, like you said, that complete, officially represents kind of, what the real truth is. Um,
you just said. 100% agree with you. And it's a very hard thing to solve, right? You need to understand the data provenance. You need to understand how the data got transformed. What is the lineage of this data? Who touched what? You need to do a lot of things to build that trust. It's a simple word to say, but there's so many things that you need to do in terms of being able to observe what's happening to your data lifecycle, having the right audit compliance, logging around every change that happens to your data, and then being able to guarantee your freshness, governance is
Absolutely.
super
You know,
essential.
and kudos to you for building your company kind of pre-LLM, but understanding how to pivot and roll with, so you work very copacetically with every large model and kind of, bring out the best in them because you add more value to the fuel going in. It's almost like, when you go to Chevron, you get gas, and then they have this little thing you can buy for $1.99 to boost the boost the thing. It's kind of like you're boosting the data that goes into the LLMs, so you get a much cleaner engine.
Well, you're right. And we started the company with that mission and vision. Like 5 years ago, the first website, the first iteration was we want to make data accessible for companies that are not digital natives or tech first by using data products and help use the data product construct to help them get into the AI powered future.
Yeah.
What was the first thing that we wrote, and that was our initial vision. So we saw this is coming, and it requires a different paradigm shift. And imagine like building an OS took some time, yeah, about 3.5 years for us to
Oh,
mature.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a very exciting company. Kudos to you and your co-founder. Um, Great catching up with you. There's a lot going on here. I hope we get to do this again soon.
Absolutely, Kanan. Great conversation and a lot of
Okay.
fun.